The fluorescent lights flickered overhead in the sterile hospital corridor, casting an unflattering glow on the linoleum floor. Maria pushed her mop in rhythmic strokes, the sound of bristles scraping against the tile echoing in the silence. She glanced up briefly as a group of doctors passed, a small world of laughter and confidence, their crisp white coats billowing like flags of privilege. Each step they took felt like a reminder of her place in this hierarchy, a constant tug of war between the invisibility of her effort and the brilliance of their titles. Across the waiting area, Nathaniel Cole stood with arms crossed, his tailored suit sharp against the dull backdrop of the hospital's worn decor. He surveyed his surroundings with a practiced indifference, his blue eyes cold and calculating. The CEO of Cole Industries was used to being in command, accustomed to the respect that came with wealth and influence. The laughter that danced around him was a world away from the burdens Maria carried, her son's medical bills freezing her in place, the weight of his health pressing her down like a stone. In that moment, as she continued her work, a stray thought flickered through her mind: would they even notice if she disappeared? Maria settled onto her small sofa in the dim light of her one-bedroom apartment, the faded floral patterns swallowing the room around her. The air was thick with the scent of homemade soup simmering on the stove, her son Javier's favorite. She stirred the pot absent-mindedly, her mind drifting back to the hospital hallways where she had spent countless nights scrubbing away the remnants of others' pain. Each stroke of her mop was rhythmic, almost meditative, a far cry from the chaos that had once enveloped her life. Years ago, life had been different. She had dreams, vague visions of a college degree, of art, of possibilities. But when she found out she was pregnant with Javier, those dreams shattered like glass, scattered across the unforgiving ground of reality. Sacrifices were made, paths redirected. And yet, as she watched her son flourish, his laughter lifting the weight of her choices, she found a new strength in her small world. It wasn't glamorous, it was a life shaded in modesty, but every evening they spent together, sharing stories and dreams over meals of leftover soup, filled her with a purpose honed through the fires of hardship. Javier had become her reason to rise each morning, to push through the exhaustion of mopping hospital floors and to endure the gazes that brushed past her. With each shift completed, she believed that she was building a better future for him. The weight of the world pressed heavily on her shoulders, the bills piling up like an unending tide, but her resolve held fast. In a way, she had become a guardian of resilience, wielding the life she had built against the storms of uncertainty, her heart both tender and toughened by love. On the other side of town, Nathaniel Cole stepped into his high-rise office, a realm of polished glass and steel that starkly contrasted with Maria's simple life. He surveyed the city, a sprawling canvas he had meticulously painted with achievements and acquisitions. The view was panoramic, a reflection of his success, and yet, as he stood on the precipice of it all, an unsettling void loomed within him. Wealth had brought him respect, yes, but it had also wrapped him in an invisible shroud of loneliness. Those around him, associates, investors, even friends, seemed like actors in a carefully scripted play, their true selves obscured by the facades they wore. Nathaniel had always been disciplined, pushing through life like an unyielding force. His childhood was punctuated by the need to excel, driven by the absence of parental affection that had overshadowed his upbringing. The ache of that void became his fuel, propelling him through brutal hours in the boardroom, where deals were struck and futures were secured. Yet, even in the midst of accolades, the silence of his personal life echoed loudly, a reminder of the disjointed relationships that had fractured under the weight of ambition. Every day, he donned his tailored suits, standing as a sentinel of success, but beneath the polished exterior lay a man grappling with the dissonance of value. The laughter of the doctors in the hospital, the camaraderie he observed from afar, stirred something within him, a yearning for authenticity, for connections that felt real. Yet, he brushed those thoughts aside with the same certainty he faced business challenges. Compassion, vulnerability, they felt foreign, like a language he had never learned to speak. As darkness fell, Nathaniel found himself restless, his mind replaying the images of the hospital, the laughter, the hard work of the janitors, particularly that of Maria. Intrigued by her quiet strength, he decided to leave the confines of his world behind and follow her. Curiosity pulled at him, a whisper of something he could not quite name, urging him to bridge the chasm that lay between their lives. He trailed her unassumingly, keeping his distance as she walked home, her silhouette draped in the dusky hues of twilight. The weight of his tailored suit felt burdensome against the simplicity of her existence, yet he was drawn to her, captivated by the grace with which she navigated the world. It felt absurd, a CEO shadowing a janitor, but there was a compulsion in him to understand, to unravel the threads of her life that he had only glimpsed at. As Maria turned the key in her apartment door, Nathaniel lingered in the shadows, the faint scent of her cooking curling into the night air, a testament to the everyday magic of her existence. In that moment, he realized something profound. The very elements of her life that he had dismissed or overlooked possessed a richness that he had long yearned for. A warmth enveloped him, igniting a flicker of hope that suggested maybe, just maybe, he had been wrong about the world he had built for himself. And as he listened to the muffled laughter of mother and son drifting through the thin walls, he knew that everything was about to change. The following morning dawned gray and oppressive, a reflection of Nathaniel's mood as he stared at the chaotic mess of papers sprawled across his mahogany desk. A significant deal was at stake, one that could either propel his company to new heights or plunge it into precarious territory. The phone rang sharply, cutting through his silence, and he answered with a practiced tone, but the voice on the other end bore news of a potential crisis that sent a shiver down his spine. An error in the logistics team threatened to derail everything he had worked for, and he was running out of time. As Nathaniel paced the room, the air thick with urgency, he noticed the flicker of movement outside his office window. The hospital's janitorial staff was beginning their morning rounds. In the midst of them, he spotted Maria, her mop gliding over the floor with unassuming grace. Frustration surged through him at the thought of how her labor, so far removed from the world he commanded, could bring him to a standstill. He had never interacted with her beyond fleeting glances, yet her quiet resilience tugged at his thoughts, planting an inexplicable seed of curiosity. Driven by desperation, Nathaniel decided to confront her, the impulse stronger than the voices in his head urging him to retreat. Not quite aware of what he was hoping to achieve, he pushed open the door and stepped into the hospital corridor. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled his nostrils as he approached Maria, who was diligently scrubbing the floor. Her brow was furrowed in concentration, undistracted by the bustle of the world rushing around her. "Maria," he called, his voice projecting a mix of authority and urgency, instantly drawing her attention. She paused, her mop suspended mid-stroke. "I need your help." Her expression shifted, a blend of surprise and wariness crossing her features. "Help? From me?" she asked, her tone calm yet laced with curiosity. The way she looked at him suggested she was acutely aware of the lines that divided their worlds, a divide he had been too blind to see until now. "Yes, he stammered, momentarily caught off guard. "There's a situation with a contract. I need someone with eyes on the ground, someone who understands the people here." He gestured vaguely toward the busy nurses moving through the corridor but quickly regretted the vague implication. She didn't belong to that world. "I mean, someone more capable than the team I have," he finished, realizing how dismissive he sounded. Maria's expression hardened slightly. "I clean floors, Mr. Cole." "I'm not sure how that translates into understanding contracts." The steel in her voice surprised him. She wasn't the meek figure he had assumed, there was a confidence in her quiet words, a sense of dignity that held its own weight. Yet, something about her tone sparked a flicker of intrigue within him. "I'm not trying to insult you," he replied, attempting to mask his irritation. "It's just that things are messy, and I figured." "Messy," she repeated, narrowing her eyes, as if she had encountered this word too many times in her life. "Life is often messy. It's what we do with it that matters." Her gaze held an intensity that was both unsettling and compelling. He felt a sudden rush of embarrassment, as if he were standing on shaky ground. "Look, I don't have time for a debate, I just need a solution," he snapped, the pressure of the situation overwhelming his patience. "If you can't help, I'll find someone else." But as he turned to walk away, a part of him questioned his tone, the urgency that had prompted it. Through the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of her shifting stance, her hands clenched tightly around the mop handle. The poise with which she carried herself ignited an unexpected resolve within him. She was not just a janitor, but a woman shaped by challenges he couldn't fathom. "Give me the details," she said quietly, her voice steady and composed. "I'll see what I can do." Nathaniel paused, the air between them electric, and for the first time, he recognized the depth beneath her surface. He looked back, searching her expression for signs of the life that lay hidden beyond the uniform, strains of memory flickering there, hints of a past woven with struggles that mirrored his own in ways he had never anticipated. An unmistakable bond formed in that fleeting moment, compelling him to reassess everything he thought he knew. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, creating a sterile hum that echoed in the hospital's conference room. Maria and Nathaniel sat across from one another, a table strewn with papers stretching between them. On one side, Maria clutched a marker, the tip hovering over a large whiteboard, her brow furrowed and lips pursed in concentration. On the other, Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, observing her every move with an intensity that made the air crackle with tension. "Okay, so let's break this down," Maria began, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "If the logistics team missed the delivery deadline, it's likely because of miscommunication." She scribbled notes on the board, her handwriting both tidy and fluid, like a dancer's grace on the edge of precision. "We need to identify who was responsible and ensure there's a backup plan for next time." Nathaniel watched her, a mix of admiration and surprise coursing through him. The woman who had once seemed just a background character in his world was coming to life with skill and insight. "You're saying we need a contingency plan?" he asked, leaning in, genuinely intrigued. "Exactly," Maria replied, tilting her head, her confidence slowly melting the walls he had built around himself. "If we can keep a list of alternate suppliers and make regular check-ins, we can avoid future crises." She paused, her expression softening slightly. "It's not just about the contracts, it's about understanding the people behind the processes and the challenges they face." Nathaniel's brow furrowed. For the first time, he felt a real connection to the work he had always viewed strictly through a transactional lens. "You understand this better than my team does," he admitted, though it felt vulnerable to acknowledge. She met his gaze, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The noise of the bustling hospital faded as they recognized the nascent respect building between them. "It's more than just business for me," Maria murmured, her voice quieter now. "It's about life and the things that really matter, the families, the patients, and the sacrifices we all make." Nathaniel nodded, reflecting on her words, memories of his childhood surfacing unbidden, his lack of connection with his parents, the loneliness that echoed through the success he had built. With each beat of her revelation, he felt the distance between their worlds narrowing, and the fear he had buried began to crack open. "I didn't realize," he started, but he could only trail off, at a loss for how to articulate the emotional understanding blossoming within him. "Let's work together on this," Maria suggested, her tone filled with uncharacteristic warmth. "If we combine my knowledge of the hospital's workflow with your access to resources, we can create something sustainable." It surprised him how much he wanted to agree. He felt the whisper of something new forming between them, a possibility of collaboration that felt both exhilarating and daunting. "Okay," he said, a hint of a smile creeping onto his lips. "Let's figure this out together." They spent the rest of the day mapping out strategy, trading insights that flowed effortlessly between them. Maria taught Nathaniel about the nuances of hospital operations, how empathy could be an equally important currency as any contract he had ever signed. In return, he shared the intricacies of corporate strategy, the balance of profits and ethics, revealing the underlying pressures that felt as suffocating as Maria's struggles with bills. Moments of laughter punctured the seriousness of their conversation, sparking a camaraderie that was both surprising and refreshing. By the time dusk settled over the city, they had forged a plan, a new narrative that wove together their strengths. Maria felt lighter, the burdens of her world momentarily suspended in the glow of this newfound partnership. Nathaniel, for the first time in years, felt a spark of hope flicker alive, the shadows in his life receding in light of this unexpected alliance. They were not just a CEO and a janitor, they were collaborators, united by their differences and propelled by a shared sense of purpose that had begun to reshape their lives, one conversation at a time. Maria leaned against the kitchen counter, the warm light casting a gentle glow on her features as she stirred the soup. Javier was tucked away in his room, absorbed in the world of comic books that filled the shelves around him, and in the stillness, she found a moment to reflect. She had spent years in this very apartment, clinging to the dreams she had once harbored, and now, she could almost see the fragments of those dreams scattered like leaves in the wind. It had been a spring day, bright and full of promise when she first discovered she was pregnant. Maria remembered the shock, the swirling emotions that had danced through her like new blossoms. College lay just before her, her acceptance letter pinned to the fridge, a testament to her hard work and ambition. She had felt invincible then, dreaming of art exhibitions, of creating masterpieces that would celebrate her heritage and inspire others. But that vision collided with reality as she held her pregnancy test, the 2 lines marking the end of her childhood dreams and the beginning of a new, uncertain path. The weeks that followed were a blur. Her relationship with Javier's father crumbled under the pressure of impending parenthood. He had left, an escape artist fleeing the scene of their heart's labor, and she was left holding the weight of her choices, a single mom with no safety net. The pain of that abandonment carved deep lines into her heart, ones that time and resilience would teach her to wear with pride. With each setback, she worked harder, took on multiple jobs, poured her heart into every cleaning shift, every care given, channeling her despair into determination. Each night, Maria would sit in the dim light of her cramped apartment, the walls steeped in shadows, clutching little Javier close as she whispered stories of far-off lands and heroes who fought for what was right. She filled his little world with imagination, even as the reality outside felt heavy and gray. She projected her dreams onto him, hoping to ignite a spark that would send him soaring above the limitations she had faced. Her boy's laughter filled the silence, a beautiful symphony that balanced the dissonance of her choices, making every struggle worth it. Yet, beneath the surface of her nurturing persona, a tempest churned. Maria constantly battled the voices of doubt that whispered she was not enough, that she had squandered her talents, her potential, and her worth. The art she had dreamed of creating became a distant echo, and she often wondered if she had sacrificed it forever. She felt the weight of sacrifice with every stroke of the mop, each move a reminder of the artist she could have been, now a ghost haunting her own life. In the solitude of her evenings, she occasionally flipped through old sketchbooks, pages filled with the brilliance she had renounced, each drawing a testament to dreams flickering in the twilight. At the hospital, the fluorescent lights reflected off the linoleum, but Maria never saw it as simply a job. Each sweep of her mop was a brushstroke on a canvas that was the lives of others, the pain, the healing, the resilience she witnessed daily. She often thought about the patients who lay behind closed doors, each a chapter in an emotional saga much like her own. Maria lost herself in the stories of families waiting for loved ones, drawing strength from their vulnerability, and this silent camaraderie became an anchor in her world. She hoped that by sweeping away their pain, she was somehow granting them a little more time, a little more light. As Nathaniel stood at the edge of her universe, he felt a strange longing unfurl within him. His life had always been a climb, but each success had come at a cost, familial love sacrificed at the altar of ambition, true connections swallowed by the chase for accolades. He had filled the emptiness of his heart with work, but as he watched Maria navigate her challenges, he found himself standing at a crossroads. The struggle in her eyes resonated with the hidden scars of his own soul, pain buried beneath polished surfaces, a longing for authenticity that had eluded him in boardrooms filled with smoke and mirrors. In her, he saw a brilliance untouched by the greed that had tainted his world, a raw essence that was beautiful precisely because it was imperfect. The laughter of her son drifting through the thin walls played like a melancholic melody against the symphony of his sterile existence. Nathaniel began to realize that success was hollow without connection, and the value of life lay not in accolades but in the moments shared with others. Maria's resilience ignited a spark inside him, a desire to confront the emptiness he had known for so long. As the soup bubbled gently on the stove, Maria sighed, reflecting on the journey that had led her to this moment. She could no longer ignore the pieces of herself that lay scattered, lost in the chaos of survival. With Nathaniel in her life, flawed, human, and complex, she sensed a shift stirring within her. Their worlds had collided in a way that had begun to weave a new narrative, prompting her to reclaim the dreams she had let slip through her fingers. The flickering hope was growing, fueled by the belief that perhaps she could bring her brilliant spirit back to life, not just for herself but for Javier too. In that moment, the door to her apartment opened, and Javier bounded in, his laughter lighting up the dim space like a beacon. Maria's heart swelled with love, and in the warmth of that embrace, she felt the echoes of possibility bloom once more. Whatever trials lay ahead, she was ready to face them, no longer as an invisible protagonist but as a woman reclaiming her voice amid the noise of the world. And unbeknownst to Nathaniel, her strength would soon begin to reshape not only her own life but his as well, drawing them both into a shared journey of rediscovery, heart, and the pursuit of something greater than themselves. The mornings had taken on a new rhythm, an unspoken promise lingering between them. For Nathaniel and Maria, their daily interactions had become a dance of intellect and emotion, a connection that was slowly bridging the gaps that had once defined their worlds. However, the serenity of their newfound collaboration was about to be shattered by an urgent crisis that loomed at the hospital, one that would test their resolve and the bond they had begun to forge. On that particular day, as the sun broke through the gray clouds, Maria received a call that sent her heart racing. An outbreak of a contagious virus had struck the pediatric unit where Javier was being treated, creating a wave of panic among families and staff alike. The hospital was scrambling to contain the situation, and resources were stretched thin. The familiar hum of machinery felt ominous, the usual rhythms of care and comfort disrupted by fear and uncertainty. Without a moment's thought, Maria rushed to the hospital, mopping forgotten corners as she fought to maintain some semblance of order amidst the chaos. Yet, this time felt different. She was no longer merely a janitor, the stakes had shifted. Her mind raced with thoughts of Javier, her heart pounding not just for her son but for the other children who were also at risk. She refused to allow old fears to dictate her actions. This was a time to step forward, not retreat. As she scrubbed the floors, she overheard a pair of doctors discussing the rising number of cases. "We need more staff in the pediatric ward," one of them said, his voice tinged with desperation. "We can't let this spiral out of control." The urgency in his tone ignited something within Maria. She realized she had depths of knowledge about the hospital she had never fully acknowledged. The inner turmoil began to solidify into focus. She would take charge instead of hiding behind her mop. Meanwhile, Nathaniel was in his office, clouds of anxiety swirling above him. The board meeting he had prepared for now felt trivial against the rising tide of the hospital crisis. Watching Maria navigate the chaos, he felt an overwhelming urge to step outside the confines of his corporate cocoon. Those sterile walls, once a fortress of his accomplishments, now felt like chains binding him to a life he no longer wanted to lead. The insight Maria had given him about community and empathy echoed in his thoughts, urging him to act. He decided to leave his office and went searching for her. When he found Maria working tirelessly, her brow glistening with sweat and determination, he felt a rush of admiration. "You can't do this alone, Maria," he said, his voice firm but compassionate. "Let me help you." It was the unveiling of a new side to himself, one determined not to just lead but to collaborate and uplift those around him. Maria looked up, taken aback by the sincerity in his eyes. "I can't focus on contracts while families are in need," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "There are children here, Nathaniel. I need to do something that matters." She was resolute, her old self slipping away like an ill-fitting coat. The fear of inadequacy that had clung to her began to dissolve as she recognized her worth in this moment as both an employee and a mother. "I understand," he said quickly, nodding in agreement. "But together, we can be more effective. Let's mobilize employees from other departments too. They can assist with logistics or patient support. I can handle the corporate side." His offer hung in the air, an invitation for collaboration. He had come to realize that true leadership wasn't about dictating orders but about galvanizing a team, rallying for what truly mattered. With a deep breath, Maria felt the weight of their combined resolve. "Okay," she replied, a flicker of hope igniting in her eyes. "Let's create a plan." In that shared determination, they found both clarity and purpose, shoring up the resources the hospital desperately needed. They divided tasks, leveraging Nathaniel's connections to secure additional medical supplies and staff while Maria tapped into her familiarity with the hospital layout to ensure the smooth transfer of patients to safer areas. As they worked side by side, the invisible barriers that had once separated their lives began to erode. Nathaniel discovered the heart of his purpose in life through the lens of vulnerability, while Maria grew adept at asserting her value, reclaiming her narrative amid the chaos. Together, they faced the storm, and in the end, they weren't just surviving, they were thriving, beacons of hope in a time of despair. As dusk settled over the hospital, Maria stood in the hallway, her heart swelling at the sight of families gathering, their faces bearing a newfound sense of relief. She caught Nathaniel's gaze, and in that moment, they shared an understanding that transcended words. They had weathered a tempest together and emerged not only as allies but as friends transformed by their trials, each inspired by the other's strength. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they were ready to face them, not as invisible figures but as active participants in a story woven from resilience, connection, and a shared commitment to something greater than themselves. As the city settled into a quiet dusk, the hospital's fluorescent lights flickered, casting worn shadows on the walls. Nathaniel stood outside Maria's one-bedroom apartment, the weight of the day heavy on his shoulders yet somehow lighter than it had been. He had spent countless hours in the sterile confines of his office, wrestling with numbers and contracts, but tonight was different. Tonight, he had seen the world from a perspective that shook the very foundation of his understanding. Maria's door creaked open, and Nathaniel stepped inside, the warmth of her home enveloping him like a soft embrace. He glanced around, taking in the modest decoration, a mix of practicality and a touch of love. It was a world far removed from his own, a tapestry woven with the threads of sacrifice and determination. He watched as she moved to the small kitchen, the gentle simmering of soup filling the air with comfort. In the corner, Javier played with his action figures, his laughter bubbling over like the broth on the stove. There was an innocence in his joy that tugged at Nathaniel's heart. The boy, oblivious to the burdens carried by his mother, embodied hope that echoed in his laughter and shone in his bright eyes. A moment later, the child caught Nathaniel's gaze and paused, his small hands frozen mid-action. They held each other's gaze for a heartbeat longer than necessary, and in that exchange, an understanding blossomed between them, something unspoken yet profound. "I want to be a superhero just like you," Javier said suddenly, breaking the silence, his voice full of earnest admiration. The words hung in the air, brightening the room with an undeniable warmth. Nathaniel felt a swell of something deep within him, a flicker of recognition, a voice echoing in the chambers of his heart, reminding him of values long buried under layers of ambition. "Every superhero has their own story," Nathaniel replied, a smile breaking through his usual stoicism. He felt the weight of his own narrative shift in that instant, reshaping the perception of who he was and what he could be. He turned to Maria, their eyes locking momentarily. In that shared glance, they both understood the uncharted territory they were stepping into, a path forged not by titles but by something far more significant. Standing there, beneath the simple glow of the kitchen light, Nathaniel realized he had wandered into a realm of belonging, a place where the invisible became visible, where dignity was found not in accolades but in the tender, unwavering resolve of love. And as the laughter of a child filled the air, Nathaniel took a breath, letting it all seep in, finally embracing the truth he had been blind to for far too long, that sometimes, the greatest strength lies in the quiet grace of those who carry the world on their shoulders. In the distance, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, an exquisite reminder that every ending could become a beginning, if only one dared to see.